So I'm not very good at time management, but I just focus on the things that matter. And if it takes the whole day just to make that one decision, that's what I ultimately spend my time doing.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Details Interactive, Amperity, and Element. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 101. Yes, we're starting the next 100 shows, and today's guest is Djalal Lougouev. Djalal is the Chief Strategy Officer and a co-founder of Ometria. He has had an interesting life growing up in Russia and moving around the world prior to making the U.S. home. He started his career in finance, spent some time in the UK government, and then eventually decided that retailers needed some help in better understanding their customers, so he started Ometria. Great story, and I'm excited for you to hear it. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Djalal Lougouev. Djalal is a tech entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the retail marketing sector. He's passionate about using innovative technologies to help brands create personalized customer experiences. Currently, he serves as the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Ometria, a customer data and experience platform for retail brands. Ometria helps brands increase revenue and team efficiency by combining powerful CDP capabilities with cross-channel orchestration and AI functionality. He is a well-known speaker at industry events, and he's been featured in respected publications like Forbes, The Next Web, and eMarketer. Before co-founding Ometria, he worked in various fields from natural resources to banking, government, and venture capital, gaining valuable experience along the way. Djalal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. That's quite an intro.
Yeah, well, you're quite a guy, and I was barely able to pronounce your family name, as I mentioned to you at the beginning. When I was like 6 years old, in school, they sent me out to speech class because I wasn't able to pronounce the L in words, and so your last name threw me a bit.
No, I appreciate it. Even if you didn't have to go to speech class or speech school, you'd still have difficulty pronouncing that name. So I appreciate it.
Well, look, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. We start these shows, as most people know that listen regularly, and also this is the start of the second 100 shows of the Marketing Playbook podcast. You'll be the first 101. Hopefully, we'll get to do another 100 over these next few years. Tell us a little bit about the first story, where you grew up, a little bit about family life, and whether or not there was anything, kind of in the upbringing that would have suggested that your career path would have taken on the approach that it did.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Mark. Hope that you have many, not only 100, but many other episodes along the way. So I had multiple stages in my upbringing, as it were. I'm originally from Russia, but I moved to Switzerland, where I grew up about the age of 8. And as soon as I arrived to Geneva, where I grew up in Switzerland, I didn't speak a word of English or French, and I was kind of thrown into the deep end. And I had to learn English and French and not forget Russian, because that was my mother tongue, and that's how I communicate with my parents. And the first few years were very interesting, to say the least, where I was in school and the only things I could easily pick up were maths and sciences, because you didn't really need to speak the language. But everything else took me a few years to adapt to. And not only was it a language barrier, but also was a very different cultural shock, because my parents obviously grew up in Soviet Russia, and schools back then were very different to European schools. And I remember my first day in school when I arrived in Geneva, I rocked up wearing a suit with a briefcase, and it was all American school at first, where everyone was wearing flip-flop shorts and t-shirts, and I was the odd one out. So it was a very interesting experience. So I moved to Geneva, grew up there, studied there, and then eventually made my way to London, where I started my professional career, finished my studies, and that's where Ometria was formed. And after that, moved out to the US over 4 years ago now. So it was roughly 10 years or so in Russia, 10 years or so in Switzerland, and about 10 years or so in the UK. And now this is the fourth stage of my life in the US.
That's a great first story. So you started in finance. I guess that a function of, as you were saying in schooling, math, was something you didn't have to speak about very much, right?
Yeah, finance. And to be quite honest, I wish there was a more interesting path to me getting into finance, but it was kind of the traditional business upbringing that I had in the household. It wasn't something that I was really passionate about. I moved to London and I had this opportunity to work at a French bank. So leveraging not only sort of my finance skills, but also leveraging my languages. And I started to work in this bank. It was a French bank, and I did structured commodity finance with Eastern Europe. So it was financing and using natural resources as collateral to build giant refineries and plants and multi-billion dollar assets. And that was all just before the credit crunch. And then, so I did 6 months before the credit crunch and then 6 months after. So it was a very fascinating experience as well. But it wasn't really my passion. So I was just doing that to go through the motions.
Right. Role models growing up, any one or two in particular?
Yeah, to be quite honest, back then I didn't really have any role models that I remember, but I do remember two key events that happened around that time. One, it was GTA 3. I don't know if you remember GTA 3, Grand Theft Auto 3.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That game that came out, and it was one of those moments when I was playing it, and I was in Switzerland. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. This is like life changing. It was when they took when they went from 2D to 3D, and then I started to look into the company, and one of the founders of DMA Design that is now Rockstar North, his name was David Jones. So that was one of the people I was kind of following and looking to see what they were up to because I was so impressed by this game. And then the second one was Steve Jobs, a bit more cliche, but when the iPhone released, it was so powerful. And I remember I watched the presentation, the keynote multiple times. So I guess those two were the ones that I was mostly kind of interested by, but no real role models in the traditional way back then.
So Grand Theft Auto 3 was a role model. Okay. Well, that's going to be a
Yeah.
tidbit, a snippet in my 200th show. We'll make a note to remember that.
Yeah.
So you did some time in finance, and then you moved into a little bit of politics and government in the UK. So I can just envision you sitting in Parliament with the white wig and the robe. What were you doing?
Yeah, I wish it was that way. I was a parliamentary assistant to a political figure in the House of Commons, and once again, it was more about me trying to get as much experience as I can. So that was right after my stint in finance, and I decided to experiment with in other fields, see how the government works in the UK, and see whether there's anything I can learn from that and apply it to my future ventures. I did not learn anything that I applied in my future ventures, especially in tech, but it was nonetheless a fascinating experience just to see how politics are influenced and how different dynamics come into play. Interesting stint, but to be quite honest, once again, just like my career in finance, it was more about gaining experience and learning versus seeing that as a foundation of my future career.
Element is an award winning advertising agency optimizing e commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, they've helped 13 of their customers get acquired, with one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. Plus, they were ranked as the 12th fastest growing agency in the world by Adweek. If you're an e commerce business that needs help scaling your ads profitably, check them out at element.com, spelled ELUMYNT And so in 2013, you identify Ometria, being founded roughly around then. So what was it about? I guess there's a couple of questions. One is what you founded in 2013. Is that essentially what Ometria is today? And we'll talk about that.
Hmm.
Or did it, has it changed in a dramatic way since the original founding? And then, kind of as you talk about that, what was the void? What did you think was the problem that you were trying to solve?
The DNA, the initial pillars that we founded Ometria on, surprisingly remained the same throughout the last 11 years. Of course, the product has changed and evolved, and the type of use cases we solve and the people we sell the solution to has also evolved. But ultimately, back then, 2013, so I had a stint in finance, then government, and then I met my current business partner, Ivan, who's our CEO. And we had multiple ventures together. We did property, we did investments. And on the investment side, this was about 2010, D2C was the hot new thing. And a lot of money was invested into retail, specifically D2C. And we invested into a whole bunch of different businesses, him more than I, and we quickly realized that there was a trend that was forming. There were businesses and D2C businesses that were extremely successful and ones that failed very quickly. And we started to understand why. And we quickly realized that D2C brands that were successful were the ones that were generally trying to understand customers, leveraging data, predicting customer behavior, and communicating to them in highly personalized ways. And we weren't entrepreneurs back then. We were mostly trying to find ways to make money and create businesses, which might be definition of being an entrepreneur, but I didn't see it in that particular sense. And we said, okay, let's find a business that solves this problem to invest into. And the more we looked, we quickly realized that on the marketing side, if you want to personalize marketing messages, you had email service providers, right? There were ESPs, and those were built to send emails to email addresses. They didn't have a concept of a customer or personalized messages across all channels. And we said, okay, that's not going to do the trick. And then what's happening on the data side? On the data side, you had a whole bunch of very complicated solutions. CDPs weren't even a thing back then, but you had a whole bunch of different complex data solutions that weren't built for the marketing teams. You need to know SQL, Python, you need to have an internal data science team to be able to extract any sort of insights and then implement them. So there was a very big discrepancy between what the market needed and what retail needed to what was available then. So we then decided, let's build a business, let's build a tech software business using these two core pillars, being channel agnostic and focusing on the customer and creating highly personalized communications and leveraging data to do so. And those are the two key pillars that we started Ometria with.
So as a founder, I'm sure you've had numerous challenges. Are there a few things that have turned out to be much more difficult than you expected them to be as a founder?
Yeah, I have lots of things rushing through my head right now. I'd say there's always ups and downs. There are bigger ups and downs if you look at the last 11 years or if you look at yesterday. I think probably the thing that has been the hardest is just finding and retaining exceptional talent within any department or any application. I think overall, there are just some generic challenges that you come across: go to market, initial MVP, product development, setting up the sales and the customer success teams. But ultimately, it all comes down to having exceptional talent and having a very high bar for maintaining that talent and making sure that the sum of the business talent does not depreciate over the years, that you maintain that quality that you had when you started the business all the way through till the very end. So I think that's going to be the hardest bit of building a business.
You talked a little bit about what the void in the market and therefore what you were trying to do with Ometria, but explain for those that don't know Ometria, how do you describe yourself and what is it that you can do for retailers?
And the most basic way to help anyone understand what Ometria does is, first and foremost, we help brands, retailers, D2C brands understand their customers, right? That's step one. We help understand their customers. We ingest data from all the different data sources, whether it's your physical data, whether it's online, whether it's web behavior, whether it's email interaction behavior. Every single data source that you have, we will ingest to create customer profiles, and then we use those customer profiles to help brands and marketers and data scientists understand their customers and how those customers behave. Then we help them predict customer behavior. When is someone likely to buy, to make a next purchase? When is someone likely to churn? When is someone likely to become at risk? What channels do these customers prefer being communicated on? How do they engage with your brand? What type of products do they look at? What type of categories are they most interested in? So one is the analysis and understanding of the customer. And two is basically the communication. How do you communicate with your customers in the most personalized way? One, of course, is email. Email is the most cost-effective channel. SMS is probably number two now because SMS made a huge leap in terms of communicating with your customers. You have direct mail, you have Facebook, Instagram, or Meta, as I should say. You have all these new channels popping up. So one is understanding your customers by merging all the data, and two is being able to communicate to them across all of these different channels in a real-time way with a highly personalized message. And one thing that we focused on since day one, of course, we have these two pillars of communication and data, but what sits right in the middle, the heart of it, is that we only work with retail brands. That was the mission and the purpose since day one, and we haven't changed and shifted from that focus since, because I believe that to be the best at what we do, you have to have very, very strict focus. And a lot of our competitors, a lot of vendors out there, they tackle many verticals. They do finance, travel, insurance, fintech, you name it. But I think retail is such a complex and sophisticated space that you need a purpose-built solution to be able to solve the current challenges that brands have.
Having been in retail, whether it be in catalog when I started my career or in digital for the last 20 some odd years, one of the biggest challenges that I have faced is that there have been tools like Ometria, different iterations of them over time, and seemingly they brought data together. They helped you structure the data. Where they really fell was in helping the marketers figure out, now what do I do with the data and the intelligence that you're bringing to me? How are you helping the retailer go from a whole bunch of data with insights and now actioning it?
Yeah, so there are many ways to approach that. And you just said there are so many different technologies and solutions out there. And I was speaking with Mike at Commerce Next. I don't know if you saw it, but I used this Martech 10,000 chart.
Mike Dupuis, folks, one of the advisory board members of Ometria, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I use this visualization of the Martech 10,000, which has all the different marketing solutions that brands or any other businesses can use for the two things that I've mentioned. But ultimately, where we see a lot of brands struggle, and what we're experiencing today in the market is that we are seeing the CDP cycle 2.0. So in the last 11 years, this is what I've seen. So we've seen a huge investment go into the marketing solutions. So ESPs have evolved and now they became cross-channel orchestration platforms. So a lot of the brands that we've worked with replaced the marketing side. And then there's been a huge surge in CDP, or the CDP acronym, whatever you want to bucket under that. So everyone has gone through a CDP buying cycle and have done many, many RFPs. And what we're now experiencing specifically in North America is a lot of brands have invested millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars and years into implementing CDPs, but not driving the outcomes that they wanted. And those are specific outcomes that you've mentioned. So what we've created effectively, not we, I mean, what the industry has created is that we went from data silos to tech silos. So we just moved data around from one place to the other. And even though it's aggregated data, where you might feed all your data, all your customer data into one single unit, which is the CDP, it still doesn't talk to the marketing channels. And that's the biggest blocker today. And that's the one that you've just raised. So what we've done is twofold. One, we've created a solution that has both components. And of course, we appreciate not all brands today will have the need to replace both the marketing side and the CDP side, but our solution is built specifically for that. So we have the CDP capabilities and the marketing capabilities. So we bridge the gap. That's step one. Step two, because of our retail expertise, we actually help brands understand and provide recommendations of what are all the different tactics that they need to be deploying to be able to drive business outcomes. For example, we have, every time we start working with a brand, we look at 30 retail specific metrics to identify how their brand is performing today. For example, second to third time conversion rate, they're under indexing. What are the different tactics and strategies that you need to be implementing, leveraging the data to be able to drive those business outcomes? So even though you might have all the data in one place and you might have these beautifully unique identity resolution profiles, having all of that data in one place is not going to drive business outcomes. So you need to be able to understand where the low-hanging fruit are, how do you maximize it, what are the different tactics, and then you need to implement it. And I think the biggest blocker today is that we went into these tech silos, and a lot of investment has been made into data CDPs that don't enable teams, specifically marketing teams, to be able to execute on that data.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as you were talking about, moving the data from one pocket to another, if you will, I have my background was finance when I first started. So like you, I did some different things before I got involved in marketing. And, as a marketing guy, you need to go to the CFO in an organization. You need to say, hey, I want to spend X amount of dollars. I want to get and I like order, right? I want to get my data in order. And they're like, that's great. Fantastic that it's going to be in order, but how are we going to cover the increased cost? And more importantly, how are we going to get a return on the investment? And that's the struggle that I think still so many marketers have. There's, CDPs, customer data platforms, there's tons of them, different flavors, but bringing that data into proving to me and proving to my CFO that I can increase revenue is a big challenge. So I know you talked about the activation, but in practice, how are you helping the marketer demonstrate to themselves and the rest of management that there has been an increase in the revenue because they're now using your tool?
Specifically from that perspective, what we help the champions that have brought Ometria into their business, or the key stakeholders that brought Ometria into the business, help them understand the value that we drive from multiple angles. One is the straight up, how much more money have we made you, right? Because you have, depending on what attribution methodology you use, and
we don't talk about the A word here.
Okay. Sorry, I'm glad. Attribution is the most made up thing ever, but I'm sure that there'll be many discussions around that. But let's say that you use the most basic attribution whatsoever, or you rely on the attribution that this particular brand has used historically, and we just compare a metric performance to whatever they're using in the past. So that's just the basic like for like comparison. And given our specialization in retail, and given the fact that we can provide recommendations, we've never had an issue of not outperforming the competitors that we typically replace. The second component that we see a lot of traction and benefit with is that we are able to provide a level of insight that brands, specifically at the C-suite, have never seen before. And that comes from our Architect product, where we have created a data set of 30 billion data points that is anonymized across all of our customers, that is able to train our algorithms with a lot more accuracy and provide recommendations that a lot of the brands haven't seen before. I'm not going to mention any names, but through our advisory board, we've had many points of feedback where C-suite members came back to me and be like, this report or this type of data is something I've never seen before. So one is just comparison like for like. Two is the data and the insight and the recommendations we have surfaced that they've never seen before. And the third component is team efficiencies. I've spoken to, I think, because I initially started, when we started Ometria, initially was on the product side. And my day-to-day job was to speak to as many retail marketers as I could get in front of. And I think to this day, I've spoken to about 1,000 different retail marketers. And everyone says their brand is different. Everyone says they have unique value proposition. Everyone says they have a unique product. So every single brand is different. But one thing is consistent with every single conversation I've had is that no one has enough resources. You could be a team of one, you could be a team of 1,000. Whoever's a team of 1 or 2 or 10, they're like, we can't wait to be the brand that has a team of 100. But by the time they get there, they realize that the process will kill productivity. So one thing that is consistent is no one has enough resources. And what we always try to do when we deploy Ometria and provide recommendations and action these recommendations is understand team capacity, processes, technologies, resources that they have, that whatever we recommend is actually doable. For example, an AI company can come along and say, you know what, here's 1,000 different behavioral clusters, but you need 50 HTML developers and 50 designers to be able to actually implement all those things. So in addition to driving like-for-like uplift, in addition to being able to surface insights that these brands or the C-suite has never seen before, we're able to understand the processes of retail businesses to help them deploy tactics and marketing strategies that are significantly more efficient because of the way that we've developed our solution.
Thriving brands today have one thing in common. They make it a priority to understand their customers. Imperity uses AI to unify customer data and help businesses know exactly who their customers are and what they care about most. Find new customers, grow loyalty, get better return on ad spend, and manage privacy compliance. An accurate, unified customer data foundation connected with the teams and tools that need it makes everything you do with customer data work better. Build your strategy on Imperity, the platform for customer data. Learn more at imperity.com. Well, we talk about jobs, and you said you had a product job in the past. So today, you're chief strategy officer. What's your job? What do you do all day, Jalal?
What do I do all day? It's a good question, Mark. I wear many hats. The current responsibility and objective that I have right now, or right now over the last 4 years, was to ultimately create a go-to-market strategy that helps us become market leaders in North America. And that starts from building the team that will establish us in North America, which covers different roles and responsibilities, from sales to sales engineering to customer support to marketing to business development. So ultimately, I'm here to understand the differences between the EMEA market, the North America market, create a strategy that will help us get as many customers as we can, and most importantly, making sure that we're positioned correctly to become market leaders in North America in the space that we're in. So that's kind of the global objective that I have.
Right. One of the things that's I hear a lot from people in roles like yours or providers, they lament the sales cycle and how long it takes from the time that you make that first contact with the retailer to when you can actually get a deal done. And I imagine having been on the buyer side for so long, the bigger the spend, the longer oftentimes the longer the lead time is. Is that a challenge in a business like yours?
Yes, I think I haven't necessarily seen, of course, the larger the deal, the longer it will take. But sometimes I've seen that they are medium or small deals that take as much time and as much resources to be able to close as a giant deal. But ultimately, yes, the reason that the sales cycle is longer because we are a mission critical technology for a retail brand. Like, imagine that your physical store, you actually need a physical store for customers to come in and buy something, right? So in this case, you might have Shopify. But in order to make sure that those customers come by again, you need to communicate with them. And that's what Ometria does. Without Ometria, you can't run your business. Therefore, it's such a critical decision for any brand that you need to have legal, you need to have procurement, you need to have security and privacy, you need to have tech, you need to have marketing. So there's so many different use cases and paperwork to address that inherently the sales cycle is longer. But once we're in, because of our mission critical responsibilities for that brand, we are very sticky. And because we have the wide range of capabilities between CDP to marketing execution, we can check a lot of boxes and be able to deliver on multiple use cases within one single organization.
It's also, I imagine, is somewhat of a challenge in that, in tools like yours, people are going to implement them. It's not like you can really test it before you implement. So you've got to make sure that you've done all of your due diligence, talk
Exactly.
to others that have implemented before you, and then you're jumping into the deep end of the pool once you make that decision.
Yeah. And it's very, no matter how much time and resources you put into an RFP, it is still very difficult until the go live date. We see some very, very large brands deploy POCs to understand and validate some of the use cases. But quite honestly, that's very rare. And maybe 95% of the time is just an RFP that is run extremely well. And then a winner gets chosen, and then we go to work.
You're a busy guy. You're focused on a lot of different things. Any secrets about time management?
Well, Mark, I'm the last person to give any secrets about time management. I think ultimately I saw this very interesting talk with Jeff Bezos, and there was one question, and the question was, "What is the most important role of a senior executive?" And a lot of people think it's to make a whole bunch of different decisions or a whole bunch of many tasks throughout the day. And his answer was that the single most important role of any senior executive is to make sure that you make a small number of very significant decisions, not a large number of insignificant decisions. So what I try to do, and this is maybe outside of time management, but I prioritize my day to make important decisions that are sometimes irreversible versus trying to focus my time on small things that could be updated or changed or could be done by someone else. So I'm not very good at time management, but I just focus on the things that matter. And if it takes the whole day just to make that one decision, that's what I ultimately spend my time doing.
When you're talking to all of these, retailers, is there are there one or two things that is the common beyond the fact that they all tell you that they're all different and they have the unique selling proposition and value proposition? Are there one or two things that there's a thread that they say they have problems with in their business?
Yeah, it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. It is, I think the majority of brands that we speak to still don't know how to understand their customers, still have way too many systems in place. And once again, using that same thread or theme of tech silos. And thirdly, every single brand does not believe that they're communicating to their customers in the way that they should be doing. So the challenges are there, right? Everyone has these challenges, but overcoming those challenges is still very difficult, no matter what technologies you're deploying.
Yeah, I have this thing that I say to a lot of clients is, you go in and you start talking to them, and I felt this when we were when I was, in brands and in full time roles, is we all tend to think that we suck and everybody else has figured it out, right? The fact is that everybody sucks to some degree, and it's just you want to suck a little less than the others, and then you can be
Yeah.
successful. That's
I didn't want to
not.
put it that way, Mark, but yes, you're correct. And it's actually I find it quite funny and interesting that a lot of the marketers that we speak to, they're very humble and they always put their companies at the very bottom. If they were to grade themselves, everyone gives themselves an F. They're like, we're really, really bad at marketing and we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, we're really bad at getting data in one place. And I think a lot of brands don't realize that it's pretty much now the norm. They're not the exception. It is now, unfortunately, the norm within retail marketing.
Yeah. Well, I think you just said it better than I did. Well, this is good. This was great. Thanks very much for your good answers and walking us through the life of Ometria. So I do this 2 minute drill, 7 questions, 1 word answer. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. A brand that you admire or that inspires you.
SpaceX.
Favorite app on your phone.
Pliability.
The last website other than Amazon that you shopped from.
Varsity, their baseball caps.
Something that you're not good at but wish that you were.
A musical instrument like a piano.
Charitable organization that you're passionate about.
Not a specific organization, but any charity that helps with conflict zones, that help with women, children, with the wounded, with everything that's happening on in the world today.
Okay. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
The manipulation of time.
And lastly, other than family, what's your most prized possession?
I collect all the gifts that I received from family over the last 20, 30 years. And I have this box of all the gifts that I've received, and I just store all of them. And then if there's a family member that passes away, I still have this memento of them that I cherish and appreciate.
No, that's a nice one. I like that. Where can people reach out to you on social media?
I'm terrible with social media. I don't have anything other than LinkedIn. Being in retail marketing and telling brands how to communicate with their customers, I do a terrible job of leading by example. I don't have any social media. So if anyone wants to reach out, LinkedIn is the way to go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jalal. I enjoyed catching up with you and hearing about your company. I wish you good success in the future.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Pleasure being here, and thanks for having me.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Jalal Lougouev for coming on the marketing playbook. To me, today's three game winning marketing plays were as follows. Number one, if you're a retailer, one road to success is about understanding your customers. Leverage the data that you have to predict your customers' behavior and to communicate to them in a personalized way. Number two, finding and recruiting and retaining top talent is one of the most significant challenges that any business has. Other than your customers, your talent is the most important asset in any company. Work hard to train and develop your talent and demonstrate to them that their personal growth is of the utmost importance to you. And number three, you want a new tool, be ready and able to demonstrate the ROI. So many brands implement new capabilities without a good sense of what it will drive for them, or at the very least, what it has to drive to cover the added costs. Make sure you understand this before you commit. And also, most new tools need someone to manage them. Don't forget the cost of potential added headcount that you might need to take full advantage of this shiny new object. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the marketing playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.